Want to start, Brian, or no?
I'm going to start. I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order at 6:32, March 19th, 6:32 p.m. All selectmen are present. I am required to read a statement at the start of this. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30A, section 18, and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Southborough Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by going to the town's YouTube remote meeting page at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. So with that dispensed, first item on the agenda, consent agenda. There's two items there: policy on virtual meetings, and second, approve open session meetings from March 10th, 2020 and March 15th, 2020. First item, the policy on virtual meetings. Mark had forwarded that to the board. Mark, this is a document that Jim had provided to us based on guidance he received from Secretary of State.
Yeah, Jim has been extremely helpful with this stuff. So he provided the document that I believe the clerks have received as guidance on how to move these virtual meetings forward. So there's a policy the board needs to put in place, which then will govern all of the virtual meetings that any any boards or committees from the town uses. There was also the language that you read, Brian, to open up the meeting. There's language that you may have seen that was necessary, similar to what Brian read, that was included on the agenda posting. So this is fairly stock language that he's been provided, put into a policy format.
Brian, I would move that we vote to approve both consent agenda items.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion?
Discussion?
Go ahead, Sam.
Okay. I actually looked at both those documents. I think there's some places where they don't fit together very well. And so I think they need some editing. I sent some comments to Mark.
So is this the policy on the virtual meeting, Sam?
No, this is Sam. These are the other two policies that were
Okay.
sent this afternoon, I think is what you're referring to.
Oh, okay, sorry. Not the COVID-19 stuff.
You jumped too quick.
Okay, sorry, okay.
I'm not
No
moving that
discussion.
fast, Sam.
No discussion, okay.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Linda, aye.
Aye.
Shay,
Rustio,
aye.
aye.
Stivers, aye.
Healy, aye.
Passes unanimously. Next item, update on impact of COVID-19. I want to start, Mark, with the document that you had forwarded that Aldo had prepared relative to the declaration of emergency.
Before we get into it, Brian, do you want just a general update, excuse me, as to where we are and how things are going?
Sure.
Okay, I'll be brief. Since we last spoke after the governor put the additional restrictions in place on Sunday night, we got all of the townhouse staff and some staff from other buildings and most of the department heads came to the townhouse on Monday morning. Everybody felt more comfortable standing outside. It was freezing, if you remember, Monday, but the sun was out. Brian actually came, Brian Shea came, and Leslie Chamberlain, the public health nurse, came as well. We were out there for probably a little over half an hour. I thought it was a very good meeting. I think that people really appreciated the conversation. They appreciated the reassurances that we were able to give. I think it was great to have the chairman of the Board of Selectmen there. I think that said an awful lot. It just kind of set the tone, I think, for where we are for the new normal. So The employees have been in buildings that have now been closed to the public. We're not getting an awful lot of phone calls. It's been pretty quiet. It's been very productive, I think, for people that are not named Mark and Vanessa. They've been really productive, but we've been trying to figure out all these pieces to help people be productive in this new normalcy. Public safety has been, doing pretty well. I think that, and I was talking to Lisa earlier today, they have put policies in place that are trying to make sure that their staff is insulated from this COVID-19. They have closed the fitness room, which I think, it could be a big problem. Firefighters in there, police in there working out, there's a call. No one has time to wipe anything down. Everybody leaves for the call. Do you remember when you get back? Things like that. So they've done some things over there. Everything is going well. There's no issues. I talked to Chief Achilles earlier today. First question, what can we do to help? So everything has been going pretty well. We've been rotating some staff in and out of offices. There's been no issue with that. People have been working remotely, and it varies from office to office, but there's always been somebody in the office physically. If we go down the road that we don't have to, or that we're not able to, if there's a shelter in place and we get to that point, we have the ability to forward the phones to our computers and forward the voicemails to the computers. And again, operate just as if we're sitting at our desk, but doing it, from remote locations. So again, everything is functioning fairly normally right now, except for the fact that the public is not in the buildings.
Okay.
Mark, I've got, I think really just one question, and that has to do with the fire department. I mean,
Yes.
The last thing in the world, we or you should be doing is micromanaging them. But obviously they're situated a little bit differently than the police department or any other department, in that there's at least the potential for residing on the premises. Do you know if that is going on? And if so, what sort of precautions are being taken both for the firefighters, but also for people who they might come in contact with?
So that's a good question, and I can only partially answer that. I can answer the first part of that, is that I believe the firefighters are still, working their full shift. They're, living, in the station, so to speak. All I can say with any certainty is that they're trying to treat, their time on shift the same way they would in their house. You're wiping down surfaces. You're trying to, keep those social distancing to the extent that you can. They're not as packed together as they used to be in their old surroundings. So I think you do have the ability, to maintain those distances. But I can talk to the chief and get a better sense as to how that's being handled with a little more detail.
Yeah, particularly since it's likely that members of the fire department are going to be coming into contact with members of the community. I mean, I would like a comfort level on the steps that are being taken. And again, I assume that steps are being taken, but I'd like to have a concrete understanding of exactly what those are.
Sure. No, I will get that for you, and I'll follow up, and then I'll send that out all to the board.
Hey, Mark, follow-on comment on that. I don't know if other folks listened to the MEMA update call this afternoon, but apparently the state is relaxing the ambulance staffing requirements to require fewer people in ambulances. I don't know if we're doing that, but that would be a way to cut the exposure risk potentially.
Yeah, I believe that we are, and we're limiting the people who are actually going into the house to respond to the call.
Okay, good.
So we are trying to limit that exposure, Sam. That one I can answer.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments for Mark? All right. So Mark, why don't we go to this declaration document?
Sure. So this was the, I'm sorry, what?
No, go ahead.
So this, the declaration of emergency document that I sent you this afternoon, I've been, Vanessa and I have been having several, been involved in several listservs with, be it personnel directors, be it town managers, town administrators. And even though the governor has declared a state of emergency, a lot of cities and towns are declaring their own state of emergencies on over the top of that. And I've been having conversations with Aldo. Aldo has been having conversations with his municipal law groups, and they feel that Aldo's opinion as of today was that there is really no downside to doing this, and in some ways it does further reinforce the seriousness of this pandemic that we're dealing with, even though we don't have any positive tests on any residents at this point. He felt that it was, and again, I've been hearing this saying all week, belt and suspenders to what has been done at the state level.
Okay. So I think it's appropriate for us to do this. I don't know that we're going to act any differently, whether we issue this or not, but I just, quite honestly, I was looking at one of the updates that Chief Achilles had distributed, where, and in it, he listed a bunch of municipalities and cities that had declared emergencies on their own. And, quite honestly, I didn't even think to do it, but knowing that there are a number that have done it, I just think it's in our best interest to do it. But again, continue to act as we are.
Brian, a comment. It looks
ahead.
to me like that potentially gives us more flexibility to do a variety of things, having it there. Maybe we already have that power, but formalizing that seems to me to put us on a little higher ground if we have to do other unusual things to respond going forward.
Yep. And I know in talking to Mark in the past, we have other boards have issued this. It hasn't been done since I've been on the board that I recall.
2012, the micro
Oh,
that we have that came through town. That was the last time I believe it was done.
But, that was certainly an instance that was not a statewide situation. That was limited to certain communities. Certainly what we're going through now is not only a statewide, but a nationwide instance. But Marty, it seems like you had a question or comment.
Yeah, I do. In terms of optics or otherwise, or reinforcing a message, that makes all the sense in the world to me. And however we can do it, whether it is continuing to do with in terms of what we're doing with the website and everything like that. My concern with this, and maybe it's a concern that can be allayed, is kind of two sides of the same coin. Number one, what does this allow us to do that we are not currently able to do? And I took a look at the statutory authority, the Civic Defense Act and the like, and it just strikes me that most of the things that we would want to do in an emergency, we can already do. And if that's the case, I worry why we need something that gives us authority to do some things that we don't currently have, and what those things might be. So Mark, in your discussions with Aldo, what additional authority does this give us?
So I think that comes back to my belt and suspenders comment, Marty. I don't know that it allows us to do any more than we currently can do. It just kind of puts it all in one place in terms of, Aldo wanted to make sure that, all the Mass General laws and the, that are referenced in here that basically, give us the authority, from the acts of 1950 onward, that gives us the authorities that pretty much, we're exercising at this point. I hear you though.
That loops back to my point. If we can already do things, and the governor's declaration of emergency, deals with appropriations, deals with the ability from us, for a financial standpoint, to deal with things. And if that's the case, if we can already do everything that we need to do, then it shifts to my second question. What does this allow? And by us, I mean anyone in the town, whether it's a department head, whether it's you, whether it's the Board of Selectmen, whether it's some other board. What does this give us authority to do? Because I don't want to open a box of the ability to, exercise some sort of authority without knowing exactly what that is.
I think the policy simply puts into writing kind of what we're doing now, what we're, the way we're operating now. So I will say that in the initial conversations with Aldo, when we talked about, should we be doing a local declaration when the governor has already done a statewide declaration? Aldo said there's a couple of things to consider. One, what does it get you beyond what you already have under the state declaration by the governor? The second thing is, what is going on in Southborough that may be different than what's happening in the majority of the state that requires you to do a separate declaration? And that was initially Aldo's position. He wasn't sold on doing something like this, but after the phone call this morning, again, he felt that there's no downside to doing this. But to answer your question, Marty, I'm not sure that it gives us anything more than we may currently have, other than, to chime in concurrence with the governor that this is serious on the local level as well as the state level.
Mark, is Aldo advising us to enter into this or one way or the other? I mean, obviously he's read through it. He finds it legally sufficient for us to, consider, but is he that we actually do it or not?
He was the one that prepared it, and he was the one that recommended that we do it.
I think, if I may, I think this just puts it all into one document, what we're allowed and not allowed to do, and the statutes in which we're allowed to do it. I think it made a lot of things clearer for me as far as the emergency expenditures, and kind of putting in place for me who the local civil defense organization is and who makes that up. Now, whether that's spelled out in the statute, I imagine that it is. But for me, I think it just put all the information in one document, and I found that to be extremely helpful.
I'll agree with Lisa. My read through it, I was fine with it, and I don't see a downside. That was my question for council. Does he actually recommend that we do this, or was it just being provided to us for consideration? If he's also recommending that we do it, I'm in favor of moving forward.
Brian?
Yep.
I'll make a couple of points. I'm in agreement that I think it's worth doing for a variety of reasons, including a clearer communication to the residents about the situation. I had two issues that I mentioned earlier. One, I think the documents need to fit together a little better. On the declaration, I think it's worthwhile specifying this is declaration of a local state of emergency, as to distinguish from the state and the national thing. And second, I think that the authority to do things with this, currently as written, it's the town administrator. And I would add, in conjunction with the local civil defense authority or agency, however that's defined there. I think that's a joint process. And there's one other thing that says public works facilities, DPW facilities are not accessible. And I think we need to have parenthesis with the exception of the transfer station, which I think is still the current situation. Is that true, Mark?
Yeah, I think you're getting into the other document.
Yeah, both documents. Yeah, they have to fit together that way. So
you wanted to get it all out first.
Yeah. So anyway, I think they work together, and they should work together and use the same defined terms and so forth in there, so people don't get confused when they're reading different labels and different documents. But I think it's a good thing to do. Certainly encourage it.
I hear what everybody's saying. I will, I think it's important for it to be unanimous. But I would ask that, that in there, since it seems like everybody's intent is to clarify authority that already exists, that we make it clear that this state of emergency does not confer authority to any town official beyond the authority that currently exists either in the town code or state statutes. I'm really worried about it being a potential vehicle for somebody exercising authority that we can't foresee right now, and that we've granted by making this declaration of emergency. I'm very worried.
My only thought, not a bad idea, Marty. My only thought is if you start outlining, what exceptions to this, what it does not confer. I mean, what's in there is what it does confer. If you start adding in what it does not confer, then that list needs to be exhaustive.
No, Dan, I don't want to add in a list of things. All I want to do is, and again, if I'm wrong, that what we are doing with this document is we are conferring some authority that doesn't currently exist. I want to know what that is before I vote on it. But it sounds like what everyone wants to do is simply make it clear that what the process is for conferring authority that already exists. But again, if we think we're conferring something beyond what already exists, I want to know what it is before I vote on this.
I would too, and I don't know. I don't think we are, but if there's concern, then I think this needs to go back to Aldo for his opinion on that. And I want to see that opinion in writing. And then if any adjustments need to be made, obviously he presented this to us in a fashion that is ready to be voted upon and executed. If any of us are not ready to do that, I would have no interest in voting for it tonight until, as you started out, Marty, saying, I think it should be unanimous as well.
I agree.
I agree. And I think one of the whereas statements in this does seem to confer a fairly broad set of powers to, as it's written, town administrator.
But a whereas is not a
Right.
binding part of the agreement, but
I understand the implication is there. So anyway, it's worth knowing. And I think, Marty, to your earlier point, I think it's useful to ask Aldo the question pointedly, what does this give us that we don't already have in state law or other regulations?
And maybe, Brian, one idea could be to, as our vice chair is an esteemed lawyer, that he be asked to go to Aldo and ask him these very questions. And then also with that, ensure per Sam's points that, the two documents gel beautifully. And then, we can have a follow-on meeting and hopefully vote to approve. That's my recommendation anyway.
Okay.
That makes
Sounds
sense.
good.
I'm happy to talk to Aldo.
Sounds
I'm
good.
fine with that.
All right. Let's do that.
And again, I apologize for being somewhat of a pain in the neck, but I'm very wary about opening a door to additional authority when it doesn't sound like that's what we want to do.
Yep. Nope. I hear you.
Yep.
All right, Mark, do you want to go to that next policy on staffing of departments during the pandemic?
So this is something, and I'm going to give Vanessa all the credit for this. She went out and again, we try not to reinvent the wheel. She went and found some similar policies in some other communities that were looking at these things. If you read through this, a lot of what this says and does are things that we're already doing. I think the newest piece to what we are doing would be 5 and 6 in terms of discretionary travel and vacation policy. I just want the board, I want to make sure that the board is comfortable with this, and I think again, all of the rest of this I think is what we're doing already, but I do want the board to back this so that everybody understands that it's not just coming from one person.
So I would move for discussion purposes that we vote to approve the policy as provided.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other comments, discussions? And
I have a
I guess
couple.
I'll just touch upon the last part that Mark did as well, because he and Vanessa both reached out to me over the last couple of days with concerns about staff that have vacation time, either that they're on now or that is planned for the short term, that is going to take them in a place where they need to take a plane to get there, and they're going to be at airports to get there. And is there, does a quarantine period apply to them before they come back to work? Does it not? And we just needed, I think it's important that everybody participate in that discussion about, what our feelings are on that. I'm leaning towards the side of caution on this, and I would advocate for that quarantine period. Again, we're just still in the stage of this where we've, the spike is starting, and we have to do everything and anything that we can to control that spike of this and stop the spread of this.
So my only thought on that, Brian, and now that you mention it, my thought on that is we have no idea where any employee has gone, whether it be an airplane, whether it be to BJ's or Wegmans and be around lots of different people. I mean, just the fact that they happen to take an airplane, I mean, once you start down that path of requiring that, where does that level of policing stop?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're certainly right, Dan, but I think that airplane opens up the door to go someplace where is one of these hot spots, like state of Washington, for example, or whatever. So it's not a perfect definition, but it seems to me that's a useful distinction. And it's, again, not going to cover the BJ's example or other relatively nearby places, but seems to me it's worth at least having that caution in there.
Yeah, I don't know. You got people who go to hospitals, you got people who visit elderly, you got people who may go to, to New York for a weekend, which is a hotter spot right now on the East Coast. I mean, my point is, where does it stop? Yeah. Like I said before, once you start putting something in place, you better be pretty exhaustive as to what those, what those things could be. And I don't know that. Again, we ask that people be responsible in the event that they are going someplace that is, where there's a high likelihood of, where there's been a spike or where there's a lot of cases. I mean, maybe we ask them those questions, but to automatically require that they self-quarantine for 14 days or so just because they took an airplane somewhere. I mean, I don't.
Boy, Dan, I tell you, I disagree. When I looked at this, my reaction was that the language that says are expected to self-quarantine wasn't strong enough. I mean, honestly, if I knew somebody had been in an airplane yesterday or in the last week or something like that, I would go nowhere near them. I mean,
so if someone took an airplane to the Cape for a weekend, that's a self-quarantine because they were on an airplane.
Again, every medical person I've heard talk about this says that you need to be, I mean, when I go through walking through Hopkinton State Park, I keep at least 6 feet between myself and anyone else. I just think that this is an instance where we should send a very strong message. And I guess the follow-up to that is to make sure that if people want to cancel vacations, that they're not going to lose vacation time. I mean, the beginning sentence to that is that we discourage, travel. I think that's what we should be underscoring here. And I don't have a problem at all with requiring self-quarantining for anybody who gets on an airplane.
Yeah, Marty, that's consistent with some of the guidelines too, because they say if you're close to somebody for 15 minutes or more, you're at risk. And so there's no airplane flight that's less than 15 minutes. Everybody's breathing the same air there.
So how about a bus to New York City or a train to Hartford or New York?
I think that's covered, Dan, by groups exceeding 25 people. You have more than 25 people on the bus.
I don't know. Some of this I get, again, we could be here all night coming up with a variety of examples of, all right, well, what about this? And again, the very simple example of going to Stop and Shop or Wegmans and happen to be around a lot, a fair amount of people. Just look at what the lines were last week you know, at some of these stores, and you're waiting in line next to it, but you can't really put 6 feet between everyone in a line. So I just get, I don't think the sentiment is a bad one. I just get worried about, all right, if you're gonna single out, you know, certain criteria, you better be pretty darn finite, because you're going to have, you could easily have a variety of examples and say, whoops, why didn't we think of that? I mean,
Dan, I hear you, but in this instance, airplanes to me seem particularly problematic. Geez, I hope, people who the residents of Southborough are not getting on buses and traveling to New York. But my inclination is not to have the perfect be the enemy of the good here.
Yeah.
And I think as written, it's a good policy and one I'm very supportive of.
So one of the things that this kind of evolved from, it started, one of the drafts had discussed travel to level 2 countries or not.
Right.
Or level 2 or lower. And, I wanted to be stricter than that because, while the plane on Wednesday may fly from a level 2 country to the United States, on Tuesday, it may very well have been in a level 3 area. You have no way of tracking where the plane itself went and people who were on the plane came from and what level of decontamination the staff there may have put to it. So I was much more in favor of just going stricter with that. And, if you're in a situation where you're not meeting the recommended social distancing requirements and the number of people, then I think we're best in requiring the self-quarantine.
so Brian,
So we can
I'll
get-
throw one more out. I was at a wake just a handful of days ago, and there was a line around the corner. All right, so everyone was standing. I mean, where do you, if you limit this to just a handful of the plane travel and all right, nobody can go to a wake. And if you go to a wake, you better make sure that you bring your 6-foot ruler on the other end of you, and otherwise you're going to have to self-quarantine for 14 days. I mean, again, not bad sentiments as to what we're trying to do, but where does it stop?
So Dan, the one thing I'll mention, I hear you. We can sit here and we can find scenarios that don't fit in this and things that that make sense. And that's kind of the line that Vanessa and I kind of straddle all day, is trying to figure out what makes sense and figuring out what we can control. We can't control everything. But all I know is that there are some, if there are some circumstances or situations that employees could get into or could do, which potentially could infect, a department or a building. We don't have very big staff. So one person can throw a huge monkey wrench into our public safety response, our townhouse.
All right, so let me ask another question. Do we have the legal authority to require this, and who is going to police it?
This is not illegal. I've talked to Labor Council about this. It's not a legal issue. It's a policy decision. And, if the board wants to put this in place, he doesn't see, any, there are no legal issues, as far as he's concerned with this.
Who's going to monitor and who's going to watch that to ensure that individual did not leave their house for 14 days or didn't go anywhere?
Nobody
If I
likes
may-
the current quarantine.
I'm concerned that they're not coming to work. They're not coming to, the town buildings and everything in that, Dan. So like I said, we only can control what we can control. If the kids are being told they're not in school, are they all staying home or are they going to Miami Beach? So
If I may add as well, I worried about this as well, and I worried about restrictions, but at the end of the day, our job is to make sure that the people's business gets done in the town and that we do what it takes so the town offices don't shut down, so the business can get done and payroll can get funded. And if we can put a little thing in place, as restrictive as it is, if we can put something in place to give a small measure of comfort that that may be a way that we can keep the townhouse open and the business that needs to be taken care of done. My fear is that, you know, in some of these instances, you get an employee that gets sick and, you know, I'm sure there's backups for everybody, but at the same time, one person gets sick and then another person gets sick and, you know, ultimately then we have a bigger problem on our hands.
Mark, are these people who are working from home right now anyway?
No, there are people who, there are a couple of people who are working from home. Well, the people who are under quarantine right now are working from home, yes.
So is this going to actually have any effect?
If they're able to work from home, no. But, you know, in the event that there are people who, you know, don't have the ability to work remotely, cannot be productive remotely, then, you know, it would have an impact, yes.
Then are they going to be paid for 14 days and not do any work?
I believe if the, you know, if the vacation is approved, and they have to be quarantined when they come back, they may have to use vacation and personal days to cover the quarantine time.
And what if they don't have that?
Then they would, I would say that they could use any leave time that they have available to them, which would include sick time.
And does every employee have at least 14 days of sick time remaining?
I would defer to Vanessa, Dan, but I think 98% of our employees have more sick time than they could possibly use.
I guess I'm with Marty on this one, in that this may not be perfect, but I think it's important to get it in place, and it includes a line at the end says can be updated as appropriate by the selectmen. So I think we can continue to monitor, and if we run into problems, we can always make changes. I had two things in there. I sent Mark a note with some wordsmithing comments, but two things. One was the DPW facility being open, the transfer station being open. And second, in terms of the quarantine thing, I think there was a gap in there in terms of somebody who's come back from a trip within the last 14 days, I think ought to be specifically addressed in terms of asking them to quarantine as well. So if somebody came back less than 14 days ago and came to work, it may be the horse is already out of the barn, but I think we need to address that as well here.
Do we have any instances, Mark, where people have come back to work without a quarantine?
No.
Okay.
No.
Maybe we can do without that then.
Okay. All right.
Mark, did you say Labor Council reviewed all of this and is recommending that we execute it as is with no changes?
He is he is not recommending, Dan. He is simply saying this is a policy decision of the board, not a legal decision. So
No opinion on it at all?
From a legal perspective, no.
Should
But
anyone,
but this is not, but again, we're not
should
reinventing.
anyone be looking at it from a legal perspective?
Well, these are existing policies in other communities that have been reviewed, and, you know, I mean, if you wanted to have council take another look at this, that's fine.
I mean, you know, again, I'm not adverse to the concept. I just don't know that we're there with how limited it is, and you know, and some of the repercussions that could come from this thing. I rattled off just some things off, you know, that I was thinking, and you know, I'd like to be supportive of this. I don't know that I'm there yet, and I'd hate to, again, like all of these things, to the extent we can have unanimous votes, I'd love to. That's not always ideal. That's not.
Hang on 1 second, Dan.
Yeah.
Looks like we lost Lisa, so I'm going to give her a second to
Okay.
call back in. Sorry for this hold up here. I just want to make sure that we're all still participating. That's all.
Yeah, Lisa just sent, she just sent me something, says she's trying to get back in.
All right, let's give her a minute. She's having trouble connecting, Mark. If you could just shoot her a note that she can call in. We won't get the video, but she'll at least be able to hear and we can hear her.
Okay.
It's too bad it was going so well.
I'm
Technology.
going out of my way not to touch anything because I know if I do, the same thing will happen to me.
Yeah.
That's right. Is anybody else on the MEMA call today?
The first one or the second one, Sam?
The first one didn't work. The second one did.
Well, the first one, yeah, if you went in a minute before, right at it, Vanessa and I both tried and,
Yeah.
you know, they said, sorry, room's full.
Yeah.
Contact the administrator.
Yeah. Interesting point. People from Western Mass and the Cape, to some Dan's point, I guess, about you don't know where people have been. They have a large portion of their housing is second homes. They said the city of New York seemed to have moved to the western part of Massachusetts or to the Cape now to get out of New York City. So
that's why the spike in the Berkshire. So
yeah, that's right. The virus is on the move. So, you close the borders.
I found that fascinating, Sam, that with the manager that was on the phone on that call from Mount Washington, one of the tiniest communities in Massachusetts, basically, you know, was concerned about what do we do with our border when we know virus is rushing toward them.
Yeah, his comment was, you know, I have one pair of gloves and 2 masks. What am I going to do?
I know.
the Western Mass is where they're going because all the ski resorts are closed in Vermont. So we can't go up there.
Ripple effects all over the place.
Yeah.
Hard to anticipate.
Any feedback from Lisa, Mark?
She was just trying to get back in. That's all I know. I did suggest to her that if she wanted to simply call in, that, you know, that would suffice as well. We just wouldn't get the picture.
So Brian, my only point is I think this may require, at least from my perspective, some additional review. You know, there's just so many scenarios to think about. I mean, what if something happens, you know, there are cases in Massachusetts. What if somebody went to a town where, you know, there are more than 5 cases? Should they have to self-quarantine because they went to that particular town? I mean, where does it stop? And if we stop it at, you know, a particular mode of travel, is that really, are we really covering the universe of, potential infectious ways to become, infected?
Well, not to be doomsday, Dan, but then open up the town halls again, open up the buildings back to the public. Because then I don't know why we're closing them.
There's people who have said just that very thing, Mark,
And that's fine. I mean, but you know what, if we're going to insulate the employees and try to protect people and telling people that, you can't travel for work, you can't go to conferences, you can't go to meetings, but if they want to do discretionary travel, and potentially, infect the rest of us with discretionary travel, when we're saying can't do it for work, then.
Good. Hey, welcome back, Lisa.
Sorry about that. My computer completely went black and died, so I had to scramble to get another one. So I'm good.
All right.
So I'll share with you, your audio and video is very scratchy, Lisa, but obviously we'll all do the best we can.
All right, maybe just try and call in.
Okay.
I guess, a question for, others. I mean, my company hasn't put these kind of restrictions on us yet. The Army has put some restrictions, but not like this. I mean, I guess I'm wondering, I'd like to be consistent with what normal guidance is in industry, in,
Yeah.
Is
So
this what the governor is putting out? Is this what's happening at the state level that we need to make sure that we're doing at a local level?
It's happening
I'd
at the
say this
federal
is-
level, Dan. I mean, I can't do it. I can't travel.
I
anywhere.
can, and I'm a federal guy, Marty.
I'm sorry?
I can, and I'm a federal guy as well.
So I'm a private sector guy who can't. So these restrictions are very similar to what my company has in place.
Mine too.
Quite honestly, these are one document that I sent to Mark and Vanessa as we were putting this together was, so we do a decent amount of military work or engineering work at naval and other facilities. And this is some of this came from restrictions that they're imposing upon us. That they're not, allowing, private sector people anywhere near the bases if any of these conditions that we've listed here apply. So I think.
All right. At some point, I think I think everyone on this probably wants to move this thing along. I've been firing holes into this thing for the last 20 minutes. You're probably tired of it. Like we've seen on the other documents that you've talked about, it's likely not perfect, but something that it sounds like everyone on this call wants to put into place without any modifications to it. If that's the case, then if someone wants to make a motion and we move forward to another topic, I'm okay with that.
So moved.
So Lisa, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you. I'm on my phone.
Okay, excellent.
Much better, Lisa. That works well.
Okay, and you did meet that. Excellent. So Lisa, we've actually moved the question on this to vote on it. That was moved and seconded, correct?
Now is with the, just to clarify, this is with Sam's amendment, just to clarify the closing of public work facilities with the exception of the transfer station, right?
Of DPW.
That's my
Correct.
motion.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, with the exception of the transfer station stays open in my opinion.
Right.
All right. And with my reservations noted for the last 20 minutes, I'm to be supportive.
Okay, Shay, aye.
Belinda,
Healy, aye.
Stivers, aye.
Ratio I.
Excellent.
So I just want to say, I think on behalf of the employees, and Vanessa can chime in if she'd like, I think that this is much appreciated. I know, and Brian can speak from, the Monday morning and meeting with employees and everything in that. I think they truly appreciate the steps that are being taken to try to, make sure we do what we can. And Dan, we can't do everything. I get that. There's going to be gaps, there's going to be holes, but again, this is your policy and we can revisit it as those gaps and holes become apparent.
All right.
Mark,
So
given that this covers the various employees and everything, I'm not sure, and Brian, slap my hand if I'm jumping the gun on this, but it would be helpful for me. Obviously, Mark, you're getting it, but I also think it might be helpful for folks who want to either tune in live or watch a video to get in person by Zoom updates from at least some of the major department heads at our next meeting.
Okay, sure.
Sort of operational status.
I think that'd be helpful. Again, I'd like to hear that. Obviously, Mark, you're getting it and have been very good about communicating it to us. But I also think that the community at large would take some comfort maybe from hearing from their public safety folks, from the DPW. I would expect maybe the Board of Health could weigh in. I'm not sure if we need to hear from other departments, but those are off the top of my head.
yeah. And again, I did check in earlier today with Leslie Chamberlain, public health nurse, who has been an outstanding resource through this whole thing. She confirmed with me that we're still at 0 positive cases in town. And, while that is obviously good news, the emphasis, in my opinion, still needs to be on making sure that we stay at 0. And that's needs to be an ongoing effort with ongoing commitments to the guidance that's out there for preventing the spread of this. So, but I think that would be good though to have that input from the public officials, Marty. So a couple of other things that I just wanted to run through and shouldn't take too much time. And if others have other items as well, we can discuss those. For future board meetings, obviously I called the emergency meeting this past Sunday night, and I did that specific to the actions that the governor had taken earlier that day. In my opinion, I thought that had significant impact on town employees and operations at the townhouse starting that next morning. My goal would be to call meetings with providing the 48-hour notice consistent with the open meeting law requirement. I want to do that to the best extent practical. But as this is an ever evolving situation, if another situation arises where I think we need to get, together as a group on a sooner and quicker basis, I will call an emergency meeting again. But for everybody on the call here and everybody in town who may be listening, it is still my goal to comply with the 48-hour notice to the best extent possible. I think it's important for us to continue with these meetings on Zoom until the governor starts to lessen restrictions on gatherings. I just think it's important to keep distance and to not put people at risk. That said, it's difficult. We've had a little bit of technical issues tonight, just among the 8 of us that are on the call. It's going to be difficult to try and open meetings like this up for public involvement and public participation. I think that's going to be a challenge. Given that, it's my intent to only include on agenda items, to limit any items and prevent from putting on an agenda an item that by its nature would invite a significant amount of public participation. And I think it would be important to hold off on those items, again, until we reach a time where the governor starts to lessen restrictions on gatherings and the public can start to attend our meetings. That may not be the case all the time, but to the greatest extent possible, I'd like to limit that. And if others feel differently, I'm certainly
Makes
willing
sense, Brian.
to hear a different opinion.
Sense to me.
And maybe Tom can work on technology that would allow more two-way communication between us and the public. There may be techniques to do that. It'd be great.
Yeah, certainly we can effort it. And depending on how long this goes, at some point in time, we're going to have to get back to business as normal. And it may be that we need to reach out to Tom to find a way to allow public participation through this sort of a medium. But for now, I really want to limit it to our actions to this critical business items to the greatest extent possible.
Yeah, Brian, I agree with Dan on this, and I'll take the opportunity to say that in not the easiest of circumstances, Mark, Vanessa, and yourself have been doing a terrific job keeping us informed, making sure that we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's about public meetings and notices and everything like that. And it's much appreciated.
Well, appreciate that. And there's certainly a
Absolutely.
whole laundry list of others that need to be included in that as well. Tom and Leslie and the police and fire chiefs, among others. So one thing, now that we have this Zoom in place, what is the board's opinion on other town boards and committees in town scheduling meetings? And because one of the limitations we have with Zoom is that we can only host 2 meetings concurrently. Correct, Mark?
That's correct.
So again, at some point in time, we have to get back to life as normal. But in a lot of ways, I think that the business of the town, to the greatest extent practical, really ought to be focused on getting to the point where this curve starts to stop spiking, flatten, and we start to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm not saying that nobody can meet, but I guess I'd just like to get others' opinions on guidance that we ought to give boards and committees on holding meetings at this time.
So Brian, aren't there other, like us, we need to meet for certain things. I trust that business still moves forward in town, and that, the ZBA still, has some permitting they need to do. The planning still has some work that they need to do. We don't want to just shut the town down.
Yeah.
There's things that still need to happen, and that would require them to meet, would it not?
Yeah, it would. And, so when we met Monday morning, I'll just use planning board as an example, because Karina had asked the question about, applications that they may receive for new projects and public hearings. And, they're in a position now, right now, they can't hold a public hearing because they don't have a room to hold a public hearing in. So I think that in a lot of ways, I think a lot of proponents are going to be taking a step back at this point. So maybe that takes care of itself from that perspective. I know that there is talk of special legislation that would ease time restrictions to prevent constructive approvals of permits and projects. I guess part of me is, and I just want to be sure that there isn't a perception out there that some major issue or some major project that, again, by its nature would have a lot of interest in the public, that something isn't acted on at this period of time where it's so difficult for the public to attend meetings and participate. And I'm not saying that any group would do it, but I just don't want to give anybody that perception that that's happening and that anybody's taking advantage of this situation.
Right, I think it works both ways. You don't want the perception to be, hey, the Board of Selectmen shut down the ability of others to do meetings, and by as a result of that, and they must have known, because the some of these theories are out there. They must have known that X was coming down the pike, and they just shut it down by prohibiting that entity from meeting. So it can cut both ways.
Yeah.
My only thought is, if we have the ability to do this, if the governor has given us the ability to have these kinds of meetings, to the extent that we can expand the technology to allow others to meet, and I know Tom it sounds like he is working on an ability to expand this to a point where there would be able to be a level of public involvement. I just don't want to have us looked upon like the the Board of Selectmen is allowed to meet, but they've shut down the ability of anyone else to. Surely we have to ensure the technology is there. And if that's there and there's an ability for them to be able to meet, and, you know, and then again, by extension, an ability to have, you know, a quote unquote public meeting at this time in this kind of way. I think we should look for ways to do that instead of restricting people's ability to try.
I guess I would have a slight variation on that. I mean, I'm assuming, Brian, that we are not going to include on any of our agendas items that aren't either time critical or critical to the COVID-19 issue.
That's my intention. That's my intention. That would be the limit of agenda items for the foreseeable future.
I would communicate the same thing to other boards and committees that obviously they have. I agree with Dan. I would not put handcuffs on them and say you can't meet, but say our very strong recommendation, because of the inability of the public to participate the way they normally would at meetings, and as well as health considerations, as well as, quite frankly, the crush of work that it would take on the tech side of things, that that boards and commissions only meet if there are items that are time critical or that specifically go to the COVID-19 crisis. I think that's a perfectly reasonable position to take.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, and Marty, I don't disagree. My point is, I just don't want us to be looked upon that we are shutting the town down, including, and you know, there's people building homes. There's people who may want to move their business into town. We have empty buildings sitting out there. I don't want us to look like we have shut down, locked the doors. Nobody can do anything, you know, until who knows when, if there are ways that we can continue to allow our community to be as normal as they can in these not normal times, I'd like to see us try to do that.
A good point, Dan. And I think one of the things I've been looking around other towns' websites, try to figure out what some of them are doing. And maybe Mark, if you could certainly keep an eye toward everybody has this same problem. Concom's on a 21-day approval cycle for a lot of things. So if there are other ways that other people are doing this, it would be interesting to know what some of that looks like. And maybe they thought of a solution that we haven't run across yet to find ways to keep some things moving at least.
Well, I know that, you know, most cities and towns, and again, Vanessa can chime in, she's been my conduit for, you know, for most of what's going on around us and around the state. Most people are using Zoom. I have not seen anyone who's been doing a public hearing. Sam, I think, you know, we talked earlier about what MEMA, or I've talked with some of you about what MEMA had, not MEMA, MWRA recently did with their budget hearing for, you know, they had to have a public hearing and they accepted comments, you know, prior to the meeting, but then they also set up a link where people could go and try and, you know, and offer live comments. But I think Sam had indicated that nobody actually used that live link. But so, you know, I do think that if this is going to go on for a period of time, we need to find ways in order to allow that, you know, allow the public to have input in the meetings the same way they would if they were sitting with us. It's going to be a little bit difficult. It's going to be a little bit clunky. But for purposes of public hearings and things like that, we're going to need to get there. So that's something, you know, even Tom and I were talking about earlier today as well.
Can we take the position, as Marty said it, and maybe put a time limit? I mean, our kids are out of school for another 2 weeks. Maybe, you know, put a time limit that we can readdress it in time weeks short of a policy making board or whatnot. I mean, and I agree. I think for me, the biggest concern is the public not being able to participate in a meeting if they so choose to. So I agree with what Dan said and what Marty said, but to take it a step further, maybe we would look at it in 2 weeks and, you know, change, you know, open it back up to everybody, or I mean, I don't know what the answer is either, but I worry that the public doesn't have the ability to actively comment and maybe there's a way to do that. Maybe if you have a hearing coming up or you post your agenda and then you give the public a time frame to submit questions or whatnot. And if you do use Zoom, maybe they can answer them. I just worry about the real-time connection that if somebody's watching our meeting, they may say, oh, well, so-and-so said this and I had a question on that. And they don't have the ability to ask any clarification.
Mhm. All right, you got that, Mark?
I don't know.
I got it. Tom's to-do list next week. We'd already chatted about looking to expand the capabilities, when we start adding more boards and committees in and getting back that public comment piece of this to the extent that we can. So, yep, loud and clear.
All right, so we're not making a decision tonight as to whether or not this board is going to prohibit other boards or committees from operating to the extent they're able to. We're not making a decision on that tonight. Is that right?
No, I think what I heard in summary, we're doing that exactly that. We're not putting handcuffs on other boards and committees. Other boards and committees can meet to the greatest extent practical. I would say until we reach a time where public participation can be coordinated through Zoom meetings, that those boards and committees are highly encouraged to limit agenda items to critical or COVID-19 related business items as they relate to that board and committee.
All right, so again, this is the lawyer and me
Okay.
too. So what does that
Let's
mean?
go with what the engineer says.
What does that mean? Right? What is,
I vote for the engineer.
COVID-19, again, I come back to that. If there's a builder who needs a permit for something, or there's someone needs to go in front of planning or ZBA, and it's not something, I don't know, does everything require a public hearing and a public comment period? I mean, are there things that where normal business can take place through, and I just picked out those two entities in particular, through a Zoom meeting, and maybe like Lisa may have said, giving people, the ability to look at it and be able to comment within, X number of days afterwards, and then a decision can be rendered or something. I don't want us to, I understand we're kind of in lockdown, but I don't want us to, basically tell the community that this community has shut down. You may not do any business here. You may not, even ask to, request a permit if you need one, because we are locked down until further notice.
But Dan, what Brian just said would allow everything you just described. It would allow.
He only said, no, he said it's COVID-19 related.
No, he said, but Brian, why don't you repeat what you said?
So what I prior to the COVID-19, it's like critical business specific to that board or committee.
What's critical?
Or so
They can determine.
Decide. That's for them to decide.
We got reasonable people on the boards.
it's all different committees that have. Again, we can play the.
My point is, why can't they be allowed to conduct business as they see fit? I mean, whether it's critical or not, if they have the ability to continue normal operations and do it in a, in a safe environment.
Yeah.
Why can't they do that?
What Brian said allows that. He just said we strongly encourage them, though, to only limit it to those things. And that's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
And they're in position to
He's
judge.
baffled at me.
I'm wondering what's happening to Brian's words when they're getting to your computer.
All I heard was COVID-19 related and critical, and that is an incredibly small group of items that we are saying another board is allowed to do. When
No, strongly
if they're able to
encourage.
do it, let them do it.
Strongly encourage.
Strongly encourage.
Okay. If
So-
someone says, again, someone's saying strongly encouraged, anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. We've already been here over an hour and I thought this was going to be a 15-minute meeting and probably on me, but our words have
It could have
meaning.
been.
Words have meaning, and I don't want to look like we are hamstringing others when they could conduct as normal operations as they are able to.
So Dan, just to put a little meat on the bones, I guess. So planning board is going to be meeting on Monday night. They have a couple of public hearings that they simply are looking to continue, because they are in a public hearing process. Conservation has a meeting next Thursday that they're going to be looking to continue in the public hearing process. There's nothing before ZBA at this point, and there is nothing critical that I am aware of, and I don't think, Vanessa can check me. I don't think there's anything critical at this point that we are not doing that we should be doing. So to the point I think that all of you have made, we need to work over the next week to figure out how to handle these public hearing components to allow public participation so that we don't get to where you don't want to be, Dan, that we're shutting down certain things, and simply becoming paralyzed. That's not what we
Agreed.
want.
Beautifully stated.
Sorry.
And Dan, we can adjourn the meeting and you and I can argue about this for another hour.
All right, before we adjourn, one thing that I want to make sure that gets issued tomorrow was a clarification on fields and playgrounds as well. And it came up Monday, and the recreation director asked about issuing permits to organized groups. And the answer was no. And he said, until when? And my answer at the time was until schools are back in session. But one thing I think it's important is that I really think that we limit any activities at all on town fields and playgrounds, particularly playgrounds that have climbing structures that people are going to be touching. Like, there's all sorts of questions about how long the virus lives, on certain objects, different materials. And I just think that we're better off keeping people away from those objects, just to, again, get ahead of, do everything that we can to stop the spread of this. We're still on the spike on the curve, and we need to take actions to prevent people from getting exposed to it. So, whether nobody can set foot on a field, I'm not going to say. I think that we need to have people observe the proper social distancing. But if they're, throwing a baseball back and forth, I don't know how long the coronavirus lives on the leather of a baseball, and it goes from hand to hand. And
so now, all right, Brian, I'm going to start to.
There we go.
This is crazy. This is crazy. This is crazy. You want to try and restrict people from tossing a ball? We are going way overboard. Parents have to have some ability to allow their kids to play. Nobody can stay cooped up in a room for 24 hours a day watching Zoom or meetings like this or reading books all day long and have no human interaction or no ability to get any exercise on a playground. What kind of police state do we think that we want to institute tonight?
So I think this is going to get offended about the book comment.
Dan, can I just say, as you were talking, a little thing came in from WCVB. One of the Boston Celtics players has just tested positive for coronavirus. And whether he got it from a basketball, whether he got it from contact with another person, we don't know. I guess I'm saying I would just.
If you want to put out some advisement, but I don't know that I want to be telling people again that we are in such lockdown that you may not throw a baseball, a frisbee, shoot a basketball. You cannot do anything because, if you want to alarm the community, go ahead and put that kind of guidance, or those, not guidance, directives in place. If you want to offer some guidance, that is CDC backed, fine. That stuff is already out there, but my word, if we are going to get to a point where, you've gone to a supermarket and you didn't Southborough resident went to a supermarket and you opened up a door handle, but didn't wipe down that door handle before and after you used it. Put that in place for every business in Southborough that someone may go into right now and surrounding communities.
Aren't we talking about town fields use?
Yeah, part of me feels like, and we'll see who gets this reference, but the Burgermeister Burger.
Yes.
Like Christmas thing, like prohibiting fun, prohibiting toys and all that. And that's not
you, Brian.
But I think that to the best we can on town facilities, town playgrounds, town fields. I mean, I'm not going to police everyone's backyards to make sure they're not doing this. That's crazy. But I think that, and I'll tell you, the playground part, particularly with plastic climbing structures, was a recommendation offered by Leslie Chamberlain, our public health nurse. So I think that is not getting too crazy. I think that's following through and implementing a recommendation from a Board of Health official.
Hey, Brian, how about this as a suggestion? I mean, I agree with you completely that we shouldn't be issuing any permits for organized groups on any of the town fields. It seems to me that's a pretty easy call.
I agree.
And tonight, why don't we request that the town's health officials come up with a list of recommendations for the use of the town fields and playground facilities. And it's just, well, it'll be that. It'll be a list of recommendations. I hadn't thought about, my kids are in their 20s. I hadn't thought about the thing about climbing, but you know what? It's actually a pretty good point. Because supposedly that's an easy way that the virus can be transmitted. But rather than us trying to do it here, leave it to the public health officials in the town to come up with a list of recommendations for the best practices on using the town playgrounds and fields.
Yep.
And Brian, don't forget Southborough Golf Club. If you want to do something, we got to be consistent. People are going to be, pulling the, pulling the flags out and putting the flags back in if they're.
That's a good point. No looking for lost balls either.
Yeah, you can't look.
Pick up yours.
That's right, because who knows how long that ball's been sitting there.
That's right.
It's interesting. I'll tell you though, I don't think we're far away from a state level or national level from hearing things exactly like this. I mean, if I go into my office, I have to give advance notice. I have to give notice where I go in that office and what I touch. I mean, so it's already there in a lot of respects. And you know what? I think that's good because I'll know where other people have gone. Yep. And I think it's important to take whatever steps we can that are reasonable and they're not police state steps to make people think about how they can transmit this virus and as a result not transmit it.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to bring up? Any other fun that they'd like to
Brian?
destroy? And
how about the election, Brian?
So that's one thing that I did want to touch on, but I know that Lisa had indicated to me that
I'm
she
going to
was likely
recuse myself
recused from that.
So Brian, and I will add, if part of I don't know when the last day to take out, has the last day come and gone to take out papers?
So actually, before we get to that election stuff, is there any other topic, anything else COVID-19 related anyone wants to bring up?
Can I raise two
Vanessa's
quick
hand first. Sam. Then Sam.
Just something on a more half full note, I wanted to let the board know that our new public health nurse who will be taking Leslie Chamberlain's place came to work today to get started early. And she has great experience working for the Sudbury Department of Public Health. So she wasn't due to start until about April 10th or so, but she's volunteered to come early. So we wanted to let you know that she's, onboarding with Leslie and spending as much time here as possible.
Excellent. Thank you. And Sam?
Two quick points. One from the MEMA call. Apparently, a lot of towns are working very aggressively to track the costs associated with the response here in light of potentially getting federal reimbursement or state reimbursement. So I'm assuming, Mark, we're doing that and being very aggressive in terms of tracking whatever we can reasonably allocate as a cost for the effort here.
I know
Second-
Sam, I'm sorry, just to answer that quickly. I know public safety is doing that, and the suggestion has gone out to a couple of other departments to be doing that as well.
Good, good. Second, I've looked around other towns in terms of some of their responses and things that pop out. I think, for example, many towns are doing a current scorecard on their homepage or easily available. What's the current case count, which is a little depressing in some ways. On the other hand, I think it's a question people have in terms of positive test results. Also, easier ways to maybe find a way to get on the list for notification. We've got our e-alert system, but one of the items on the list is not for COVID-19 alerts, for example. So the more we can make it easy for people to sign up for alerts through that e-alert system and know that it's there, at least on the website, could be an interesting thing as well. And Arlington has some interesting stuff for remote meeting scripts, for example, and checklists for boards holding meetings in terms of the things you want to do to make sure that you're complying with the state laws, et cetera, for open meetings and so on under the circumstances. So again, looking around at what other towns are doing, I think can generate some interesting ideas.
Okay. Anything else?
Nothing for me.
You're going to talk about the elections and.
Yep, let's talk about the election. So
No,
On that
hold
note-
Whoop.
hey,
Okay.
Brian, my point is, I wanted to say, is the election piece the last piece for this meeting? And if so, and my guess is it is, if so, I have the ability to take out papers tomorrow. I would then, like Lisa, I'm going to recuse myself, and not to the point where I'm just going to mute or take myself off the screen. But as you may know, two of our former colleagues had very public, which was incredibly unfortunate, ethics complaints made against them because they happened to recuse themselves and didn't physically leave a room. Okay, so I don't want that to ever happen. It should have never happened to those individuals. It should not happen to Lisa or anyone else. It was awful. And what I am going to do then is I want to sign off, and would suggest that Lisa do the same, but she can do whatever she wants if this is the last topic you're going to discuss.
it's the last topic that I have to discuss again.
And I planned, sorry, Brian, I plan to do what Dan did. I'm signing off as well.
Yeah, I have no other topics.
All right, Kalinda signing off.
Brascio
Dan.
signing off. Thank you. Good night.
Everyone.
Good night,
Stay
Dan. Good
healthy.
night, Lisa.
All right, so just 7:56. We're down to three, myself, Mr. Healy, and Mr. Stivers. And with respect to the election. So obviously Jim had sent the email to us 2 nights ago, I guess, so recently, requesting that our board take action with respect to the election. He and I have had a couple of follow-up phone calls about that, and he sent me an email earlier today, and I'm going to read it before we engage in the discussion on it. And it's a statement from Senate President Karen E. Spilka on elections. It reads, "The ability to hold elections is fundamental to the continued functioning of our democracy. We are also aware that we must protect the health and safety of the public during this unprecedented global pandemic. As such, The Senate has determined that moving forward with traditional elections at this time would put our voters, election workers, volunteers, and others in our cities and towns at excessive risk. The Senate will therefore take action on Monday to give cities and towns needed flexibility to address this situation, including temporarily postponing municipal elections. It will also ensure that there are robust mail and absentee voting options and protections to maximize voter participation when elections do occur. The next paragraph deals with certain state Senate elections that are scheduled to be held March 31st. That does not apply to Southborough. And she ends with, the right to vote is one that the Massachusetts State Senate cherishes and wishes to protect. We hope that the actions we take now will help ensure the integrity of our elections as this public health crisis evolves. So with that said, it appears as though the state Senate is in a position that they're going to take action on Monday relative to local elections. So it'd be my recommendation that we take no action and wait until Monday to see the action that the state Senate comes up with.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. And just as an aside, I had offered an opinion to Jim, and I don't know how, whatever comes from the state Senate action, how it's going to read, but it really would be my recommendation that I hope they don't put it on the Board of Selectmen to get involved in the election process, because I think that they ought not be relying upon an elected board to impact an election in any way, shape, or form. I would prefer that they give that authority to the registrars of voters in towns, not the Board of Selectmen, but I'll just leave that the way it is. Jim was going to pass that comment along to the Secretary of State's office as well. So I just think it's too easy for people to think that we're somehow trying to manipulate an election to have the outcome come some way. Now, I would never take action that way. Any action I would take, if it does fall upon the board, would be in what I think is in the best interest of the town as a whole, but we'll see what comes Monday.
Agreed.
That all makes sense, and knock on wood that the state Senate, and well, it's not just the state Senate, obviously it's got to go through the normal processes, but that we get flexibility out of whatever the legislature and the governor do.
Yep, exactly. Okay. With that, I will move to adjourn.
Hey, Brian, one last thing.
Yep.
Do you have a sense when you may want to convene again?
We're at Thursday now, in all likelihood, it's probably not a bad idea if at least the three of us agree to shoot for, well, when's the soonest we could do it, Mark? Monday night, Tuesday night? Maybe try Tuesday night?
Tuesday night at this point.
Why don't we try Tuesday night at this time? Just
Yeah.
to, again, the agenda items, Mark, COVID-19 related topics, period. And we'll see what develops statewide and nationwide between now and then.
Yeah, give us a chance. I'll make every effort to touch base with Aldo before then. So hopefully we can have the emergency question proclamation declaration back on Tuesday night. And also, doesn't have to be all of the department heads at once, but maybe starting out with the public safety folks. That might be helpful on Tuesday night as well.
Sure. Okay. I can facilitate that. And Marty, what I will do is I will forward the draft of the agreement and loop you and Aldo into the conversation just to try to get that started.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And so I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment?
Stivers,
Yes.
aye.
Shay, aye. We are adjourned at 8:02. And again, special thanks to Tom for all your efforts in facilitating this Zoom meeting for for our board and for the town to be able to watch. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good night, all.
Good
Thank
night.
you.